So we're going to be looking at two things today, but they both serve the same function. One is using a calendar app and the other is using a project management app. Essentially what we're trying to do is schedule out all of the events relating to risk reporting and governance. But importantly, we're doing it in such a way that we've got the prompts and reminders that we need set up and they repeat so that we don't have to keep rescheduling and scrambling to remember what to do at a particular time. So I've been working at this for about 15 or 20 minutes, and I've taken the structure outlined in the governance article and I've transposed the monthly and quarterly information into the Asana in this case. The process is going to be similar if you use a calendar app. We'll look at a calendar app in a second. The difference with the project management tool, obviously, is it's a little bit more powerful. But if we get into the details here, it'll make it a bit faster when we get to the calendar. So what I've done is I've broken things down into three different sections. The risk working groups, the functional risk committees, and the executive risk committees. So as a reminder, the risk working group is the lowest level in the structure. They are the most hands-on. They are responsible for that risk. They're responsible for ensuring the mitigation measures are executed completely and keeping things on track. The next level up are the functional committees. So each of your divisions or teams or groups in the organization, whether it's operations or IT or finance, will have their own risk committee. And then at the top of the organization, there's the executive risk committee, which oversees the whole organization. Obviously, the terminology might change depending upon your structure and your organization, but the basic layout, the basic framework will probably be quite similar. If you are a smaller organization, you might not have the functional committees. You might just go from the risk working groups to the executive risk committee, but the same principles apply. So let's take a quick look at how we can lay this out. So we've got the weekly risk working group meetings. So we'll look at the details. I've assigned this to myself. I've given myself a due date of November 5th. I'm going through November right now and I'll explain why in a second. But we've scheduled that for November 5th. But you'll see here that I've scheduled it to be a repeating event every week. So just for clarity, this isn't to talk about the specifics of each meeting, but the reason that this is a weekly meeting is the way that this team is approaching it. They like a weekly meeting. It's a short, sharp meeting to make sure that essentially nothing has changed and that they're on track. And if everything is on track, then they're good. If something has changed, it allows them to intervene quite quickly. Whereas if they left it for a month, they feel that's a little bit too long. That's their approach. Again, how you do it depends on your organization, but the point here is they've put this in for a repeating event. So now they can forget about it. Now it's in the schedule. They don't have to keep scheduling it or remembering to schedule it over and over. And they've added down here a short note just with the meeting agenda. So again, when this task pops up, it just reminds them that the meeting is coming up and what needs to be done. Importantly, down at the bottom, we can add collaborators. So although I've assigned this to myself, I can add my other team members as collaborators. So it'll appear in their task list as a reminder that this event needs to take place. And I can drop in more information here, just saying, look, here's the link to, I want to add, so I want to add the meeting detail, and then I can just put in, that's my meeting room there, or whatever I want to add in here. So basically we can just use this as the place we organize this meeting, etc. That's not absolutely necessary, but again, depending how you use the project management software, you can keep everything in the one place. So that meeting's going to churn away every week, and once we complete it, again, depending on the software, it may be different, but when I finish one of these meetings and I check it off, it'll automatically put the next one in for the following week. So these will update as we go. So you can see now it's popped up there. So that just means that we don't overly clutter our calendar, but depending upon which tool you use, particularly if you're using a calendar app, you will see every instance of this going through. So that's our weekly meeting. At the functional level, they meet monthly. So what I've added in here is a reminder that we have our weekly RWG meetings. I need to get my information from the RWG up to the functional committee. So if I look here, the functional committee is meeting on November 19th. So I've put a quick reminder in here that on a couple of days before that, I need to get my report to the functional committee. Now remember, you will have probably multiple risk working groups reporting back into the functional committee. So you will have all of your risk working groups need to get their information in by this time. You may decide you need a few more days. The functional committee might like a week or so to get all the information together. Obviously, you don't want to leave it too long because the information becomes stale, but they will determine that schedule. But we're saying here a couple of days out. So again, I've put my reminder in here. This is a repeating event. So I'm going to get reminded a couple of days before every functional committee that I need to get my report information to them or tell them where the most up-to-date data is. We're going to skip the quarterlies for a minute and just move on to the functional committee. The functional committee, they meet monthly. You can see that they have a repeating event in here. And then they also have a reminder that they need to get their reports to the executive risk committee. So the ERC meets monthly. They meet towards the end of the month. And so again, the functional committees have a reminder to get their information together. And again, there'll be multiple functional committees. All of your silos or your divisions within the organization will report up to the ERC. So again, there'll be multiple committees reporting to the ERC. So this gives time for everyone to get their information in and get things updated, and the documents updated in preparation for the monthly ERC meeting. So stepping back from the specifics here, now that this is set up, it is set it and forget it. So once we've got this in place, the meetings will just appear, the reminders will appear of the task. We can go in here to the task, the agenda items are there, and that just allows us to be reminded of what we need to do each time. We've then also got the reminders that we need to get reports to the next level. So all we're doing is adding these prompts, and it's one less thing for us to have to worry about. Now, these are the weekly and monthly meetings. We also have quarterly meetings, and they're slightly different because quarterly in this organization, there's a more thorough review. So we've added the quarterly risk review for the RWGs, for the functional level and the ERC. And now what we're going to do is work backwards. So looking at the quarterly ERC meeting, this is really going to drive the schedule for this. So I'm just going to assign this to myself. And then I'm going to go and look at the date. So we'll say that the ERC likes to complete their quarterly review essentially by the middle of the last month of that quarter. So in this case, we're going to say the 18th of December. We'll put that in. And we're going to put in, again, so we've put in a reminder here that every 3 months on the 18th is when that meeting will take place. Now, we're not saying that the 18th of the month is set in stone. Sometimes that could be a holiday, sometimes that could be a weekend, but that reminder will come up, and then whomever owns this meeting, the owner of the ERC, probably the chair or the secretary, will then look at that and they will adjust the exact timings. But this is just in here as the reminder. So now that that's set, we've also got the risk review agenda in there. Now we've got that in place, then we need to work back. So obviously, in order for the ERC to meet, we need to ensure that they've got the information they require from the functional teams. So with the functional teams, I'm looking at December 18th. For the ERC, I want to give myself a solid week to get all of my information together from the functional teams. So I'm going to put that in on the 11th, and then again I'm going to set this reminder. So now I've added this reminder. So I've now got the reminder in place, a repeating meeting for the quarterly function to meet, and they will meet and prepare all of their information a week before the ERC meets. So I'm going to add another task here that quarterly reports to the ERC this time. Meeting on the 11th. So I'm going to say that has to happen by the Tuesday. So now that's in place, we're going to do the same thing again with our risk working groups. So again, moving back from the 11th. Okay, so we'll just do a quick sense check of what we've put in so far. So we have our weekly meetings, and on a weekly basis, the RWG meets. Once a month, we have the reminder to send reports to the functional committees. Functional committees meet every month. They need to send their reports to the ERC. The ERC meets and they've received their reports from the functional committees a few days beforehand. On a quarterly basis, we then have the quarterly working groups review. And you'll see it says Friday because now that we're into December, this is the time that I'm recording the video. But let's say the risk working group would meet by this Friday. Early next week, we'd send the quarterly updates from that meeting to the functional committee. The functional committee is meeting at the end of next week, so they've got all the information they need for their meeting. And then the beginning of the following week, they send their information up to the ERC so that the ERC has what they need for their quarterly meetings. So again, this is all set to repeat, and it's set it and forget it. And so if you're wondering how long, as I said, it took me about 10 or 15 minutes to set this up beforehand. We've been going for about another 10 minutes. So we're looking at 20 to 30 minutes to get all of this set up, because the final stage will be to add in the annual reports. And obviously, as you get closer to, or as you're dealing with a more complex and more significant piece of work, the lead times are a bit longer. So as far as scheduling the annual reports, you're going to give yourself a lot longer to get things done at the working group level and then at the functional level, because essentially you're having to review the entire risk register, review all of your risk assessments. So give yourself some more time, but we'll put that into the schedule now so you can see what the entire year looks like. And just to avoid things getting too cluttered, we'll say that January 31st is the end of the year, because otherwise everything's going to be crammed into December. So now we've added in the annual review part. So working backwards, the annual ERC in this case is January 29th. That might be an unusual date, but look, we're just using it as an example so we don't clutter December too much. So we've said January 29th for the annual meeting for the ERC. So we want all the functional teams to have completed their updates a week beforehand. And I've put a note in here that its annual functional risk workshops are complete. So we're probably going to need 2 or 3 days at least to get to review the risk assessment, update the risk register. It could take longer. It really depends upon the size and complexity of the organization. But you give yourself a sort of deadline for completing all the information, then a deadline for updating the assessments and the risk registers so that everything is ready for the ERC meeting that's going to take place a week after that. And again, they may want more time. Just you put in whatever is appropriate for your timetable. I'm just going to quickly allocate these to myself. And again, remember, you can add collaborators. So once we've added an owner to this, we can then always go down and add more collaborators so the other team members are also reminded about this. And then finally, the risk working groups. Again, we want the risk working groups to complete their workshops about 10 days out, have updated all their material about a week before the functional risk committees will meet. And we've put those reminders in there. I'm just going to, again, allocate all of these to myself. So now if we quickly look at the calendar and go back, you can see this was the risk working group meeting that I checked off, and these will then just repeat as they go because these are repeating events. So we've got our weekly risk working group meetings. We've got a reminder that we need to update all of the reports for the functional committees a couple of days before their monthly meeting. We then have the monthly functional risk committee meetings, and they then need to update their reports ready for the monthly ERC meeting. So that's our monthly schedule. Then on a quarterly basis, we have the risk working group reviews their material, they update their reports, pass it to the functional risk committee. Functional risk committee meets, they complete their review, and then they send their information to the ERC, and then the ERC has their quarterly meeting. And then again, in each of these, we can add collaborators. We have a quick reminder of what is involved in the quarterly risk review. If you want, you can add subtasks. It can get a little bit messy, but you could always add subtasks to this, so you could just have essentially a checklist. But because it's taking place in one meeting, I don't feel that really needs a subtask. But again, it really depends how you manage things and how you like to use the tools. So those are our quarterly events, and remember that in amongst this, you will have the repeating monthly events. So what you may need to do or may want to do is, rather than having 2 meetings, you may want to combine all of the activities. However, what I would say is what's taking place at the quarterly risk review is different from what's taking place at the weekly meeting. So you may still want to have a weekly meeting just to make sure that all of your mitigation measures and the measures you've taken to address the risk are on track in the at the sort of tactical, most hands-on level. And then when you go into your monthly meeting, that's a slightly broader view of your risk portfolio for the working group. So you may still want to have 2 meetings. However, there may also be times when you combine those. I think that's more likely when you get to the functional committees and the ERC. They would probably just have 1 meeting in a month or 1 meeting in a quarter. They would combine those. And then as we get into January, you'll see now that we have the series of workshops. So if I was scheduling this, I'd probably schedule a 3-day workshop for the risk work group. And then the risk working group would complete all of their updates by that Friday. The following week, the functional risk committee can gather all that information. They have their workshop for 3 days, completed on the Wednesday. They update all of their information by the Friday, and then the annual ERC meeting is on the Friday, and they would have a few days before that to prep all of the material. So this may feel like it's quite a lot of work. It's certainly not an inconsequential amount of work, and I wouldn't do this if it was a one-off. But I've now put 30 minutes aside, and essentially I've automated all of the reminders for my risk management, monitoring and governance to just speed things up. And now that's in place, I can forget about it because these reminders will come up a day before, or however you set your reminders. They remind you of what you need to do that particular day, what you need to do at that meeting, what the next task is. So once the meeting is complete, where the reports need to go and when, and this is all automated. And the important thing, now that we have it in this system, is that even if I go and leave, if I've added collaborators, they will get these reminders as well. So we've removed that challenge where one person that owns the schedule is sick, or they're on leave, or they're busy and they forget to do something, and then everything else gets knocked off track. So now it's set up, we can forget all about it, and that's how we can do this in our project management software. So now we've set this up in our project management software, we'll just quickly jump into Calendar. I've set up a reminder here for the quarterly functional risk review. So it's the same as the activity we'd set in our project management team. You'll see I've put the agenda down here at the bottom. I can go in here, I can add guests if I want to invite them to a meeting. So the difference now that this is meeting focused instead of task focused. Again, I've put it down as a reminder every 3 months on day 11. And this is where the differences between tools come in. So I've got every 3 months here, or I can go and customize it, and Google gives me the option to select every month on the second Friday, which is quite nice because then it's one less thing to worry about as to whether or not it falls on a holiday or a weekend. That won't happen. It'll just every second Friday it drops in. So if you have that ability, that's quite nice. And so now this is in our calendar, and I can just repeat with all of my events. The one other thing you might like to do that I like to add to my calendar just to help things is that if I have it in the project management software, often in the project management software we'll have the option to go and sync to calendar. And I know that obviously Asana does this, Basecamp does this, and some other programs do as well. So when I go to sync the calendar, it's going to give me this link here, which I can just copy. And then I'll go over to my calendar, and I want to go into settings, because I'm going to add a new calendar. And you'll have that down here in the add calendar option. So now when I go back into my calendar, you see I've got my risk governance calendar, and you'll see that I've got my quarterly risk working group. You'll see now that I've got in my demo calendar, this was the event I just had. I'm just going to remove that for a second. So all I'm seeing now is what's in Asana. The nice thing here is that everyone's working in Asana. I don't need to go into people's calendars. I don't need to keep track of that. And the other important thing is because these are tasks, or as these are moved, these will be updated in in Google Calendar. So I can see here that it's something, I can't edit it because it belongs to another calendar, but it just gives me that view. And then if I go out for a second and zoom into the month, I can see here's my quarterly meetings. I can see my weekly meetings that we set for November. And then if I go forward, I can see my annual meetings that appear in January. The difference being that if I was adding these into the demo calendar, then what would happen is that because this is a repeating event, it would repeat and I would see it. I would see it every time. So that's how you can either manually add it to your calendar, exactly the same sort of concept as you would in the project management software, or if you have it in the project management software, just subscribe to that calendar and that gives you everything up there. So as I said, it's about a 30 or so minute investment of time up front, but once that's done, it's a set it and forget it. Now, all of this is going to be automated. All of your reminders are there, the reminders for your team members. The agenda can be added there. And once those are done, you can see when they're checked off. So if you're the risk manager for the organization, you will see all of these tasks being completed. And maybe more importantly, if they're not completed on time, you can remind the risk working groups, hey, you guys need to get your reports together because the functional committees are meeting. Or you can nag the functional committees to make sure that they are doing what they need to do. And again, it takes a lot of the thinking and a lot of the micromanagement away. Once it's set up like this, you can forget about it. Just let it run with minor amounts of adjustments as things go.